It's been a wonderful 2 days session. The best brains in the country were here to speak to our researchers and our viewers. And there are plenty of takeaways we have actually got. We are compiling that and we'll present it to an appropriate authority because these 2 days of hard work should not go waste. Now I have a onerous responsibility to welcome a very eminent personality for our closing address, Mr. Rajiv Malhotra. He is a trained physicist and a computer scientist specializing in artificial intelligence in the 70s. We never heard of this technology in those days, but he was already specializing it at that point of time. In the early 90s, as the founder of his non-profit profit Infinity Foundation, he has been researching civilizations and their engagement with technology from a historical, social sciences, and mind sciences perspective. He has authored several best-selling books. He also serves as the chairman of the board of governors of the Center for Indic Studies as at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, and is a visiting professor at Jawaharlal Nehru University. He is on the advisory board of the Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Shimla. His Infinity Foundation has published a 14-volume series on the history of Indian science and technology. His latest book on artificial intelligence, titled Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Power, Five Backgrounds, has been a bestseller. And now he's come out with his latest book, Breaking India, clearly describing the internal challenges within India. He's also on the advisory board of our Indic Researchers Forum. Without wasting any time, may I request you, sir, to give your closing remarks.
Thank you, General Kocher. It's a delight to be here. Am I audible?
Very much, sir.
Okay. And I also want to thank the Indic Researchers Forum for doing an amazing job putting this together. This is a very important topic. You know, I'm especially impressed by the military. That's the one segment of our society that I have a lot of respect for. I feel we're in good hands. And whenever I see such eminent military leaders and defense experts, it's very heartening for me. One quick comment I'll make on the last question that was asked in the previous panel, and then I'll go on to my own closing address. The question was asked about U.S. losing wars, and I think there's a deeper issue. We need to separate the part of the war, which is destroying the enemy, which US is very good at in all the examples given, Iraq and Afghanistan and here and there. And then the second part, which is winning the peace. How do you, after you've destroyed them, what do you do with the country in chaos? What do you do? And the US has been very bad at the second one, very good at the first one. And I think this has also got to do with weapons are what you need for the first one, which is just sheer destructing power, power to go and blast anybody, and versus the second part requires minds, requires brains, requires human beings, requires good soldiers, good leaders. So my feeling is that the American strength militarily is in the hardware, the whole military complex, massive amount of private companies that are at the cutting edge, and China is trying to catch up and get ahead and so on. That'll be an interesting race to watch. Whereas India, I would say, has excelled in the quality of people, the quality of leadership, the quality of soldiers. And that's why, even with less hardware, technology, India has been able to be so successful. So now you see, with the age of artificial intelligence and drones and robots, the game is changing. This is another industrial revolution coming out with such new technology that whatever we have in the pre-AI era is going to be obsolete, like bows and arrows facing an army of tanks. So we have to now think about uh, a whole new era. This will also require changing the human being, because the type of person needed in this new kind of warfare requires a whole new kind of training. So I'll just leave it at that. My main comment is on the half part of the 2.5 war. General Rawat nicely captured it. I think that India is exceedingly capable of facing the two fronts, external fronts, the China, Pakistan. The half front of domestic, problems, I think, is not just half. It actually could be bigger than the other two combined if things get out of hand. That has been the area of my study. Since the 1990s, I've been into that. And about a dozen years ago, I published this book, Breaking India, which, when it came out, it was on this whole issue of the international nexus and the Indian breaking forces, whether they are converting people in the villages, whether they are Maoists, whether they are terrorists, Islamic terrorists, or whatever kind of people that are against the sovereignty and unity of India at an intellectual level, emotional level. Uh, it was about that. And basically, I talked about who are the funding mechanisms, what are the institutions that are doing all this work, this kind of mischief, and why is it that India is not up on top of it and reacting. When there's an episode, we react, but we are not able to anticipate, and we are not digging deep into the root causes of these problems. So that book which came out created a huge commotion. Initially, people said it's too controversial, we should not talk about it. It's interesting, Ajit Doval launched the book in Vivekananda International Foundation, where he was the head at that time. And many people who are now in the establishment, but they were not at that time, were very interested in understanding this thesis, along with various other books that I came out at that time. Now this book is old. Good news is that almost all these major points have achieved traction. There are so many people out there talking about these breaking India forces, and from people in the media, people who are activists, people in the defense department, people in think tanks, people in PMO's office. All these kinds of people are now talking about this. It's no longer considered some kind of a sensational thing that I put out, but now it's well accepted. That's the good news. The bad news is that in India, we still haven't caught up with the research required to keep up with the opposing side. You as military people know that you cannot ever sit down and feel that, okay, we have all the weapons and we have all the everything as if it's static, because you always have to anticipate the other side is advancing. They're advancing their R&D, they're advancing their capabilities, and you have to keep monitoring what they're up to through all kinds of means, and then stay ahead of them. The same is true in psychological warfare and in this whole intellectual warfare, the warfare of discourse, the warfare of identity. It is true to the extent that if we don't stay on top of what others are doing, soon they'll overcome us. And that's the bad news. The bad news is that while the book Breaking India created a huge impact in the last dozen years, we did not create think tanks capable of getting ahead and looking at what's the future of Breaking India forces. What are they working on next? We're still fighting the Breaking India 1.0. Therefore, I'm writing a new book now, and it should come out by mid-year. This is on Breaking India 2.0. This talks about where is this psychological warfare, intellectual warfare, discourse warfare, identity battles, breaking up the society in terms of different groups that will fight each other, bring them down, embarrassing India overseas, the whole media scene. There are things happening in the United States, there are things happening in Europe, there are things happening in China, there are things happening in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, and of course, there are things happening in India. All of them are part of this Breaking India 2.0. But this Breaking India 2.0 is far more sophisticated than the previous one, which is what people are fighting. But this new sophisticated Breaking India forces requires it requires dedicated attention, and I'm not satisfied that enough proactive thinking is going on. So the purpose of this book is to will be to alert our people about a massive ecosystem, and we should be expecting surprise attacks in the next year. We had this dismantling Hindutva conference. Now there is this bill in the US Congress on making it criminal to have to make a statement which is deemed Islamophobic, which is a very strange kind of a law. It passed the US Congress because the Democrats have a very large amount of people from a certain intellectual lobby who are in there, and so it passed the Congress. I lobbied against it, and it is not going to pass the Senate, so it will not become law. But the fact that they had the audacity to say that not protecting all religions equally, but singling out Islam and saying that an act of Islamophobia in any corner of the world would be declared a criminal thing against as per US law. This is the kind of law they wanted to enact. And then recently, in the last day or two, Chomsky from MIT, linguist, old famous philosopher, ultra leftist, putting out his video accusing India as the most Islamophobic country in the world, the most dangerous country, taking an attack on India's policy of Kashmir, saying it's worse than the occupation of Palestine. So you see, our people are reacting every time such a thing happens. Our people are looking at it like a one-off fight here, one-off fight there, not looking at what's the deep root cause and then attack the root cause. We're not doing that because we are just looking at the symptoms and emotional warfare, but not dismantling the roots of these problems. So that is why I'm writing this book. It's about a 500-page book full of evidence, full of people will be exposed, and I'm naming names. I mean, there are a large number of Indian people naming names and international people that are responsible for these new Breaking India forces. Please realize that by the time it becomes hot war, it becomes hardware or physical external battle, terrorism, how terrorism is defined. I heard the wonderful definition of terrorism. By the time it becomes that, it's also too late, because the mental side, the political side, the emotional side, the scholarly side has been prepared for years. The pipeline is a long pipeline before it becomes physical attack. And when it becomes physical attack, then we have great military people to deal with it. But we're not making their life easier by allowing this pipeline to go on unchecked. So that's been my entire past 30 years of life. I quit my business, got out of it in order to devote all my time to understand these international forces, what they're doing, and trying to alert our people. So this is the Breaking India Forces 2.0 are completely new from the previous Breaking India Forces. We are not talking about, the problems of Breaking India 1.0 are still there, going to the villages and converting them and making them into Maoists and things of that sort. That is still there. But now the Breaking India 2.0 is a very different level of intellectual warfare than anything we've seen. You've seen a few glimpses of it happen in the last year or two, but that's just a sort of, those are skirmishes. Major battles are about to start, and I want to alert our people before all that happens. So I'm working the fastest I can I'm largely done with the book, but I probably need another 1.5 to 2 months to turn it over to the publisher, and then they have to do whatever they need to do. So we should have a major book launch in the second half of the summer, maybe around mid-year or so. And certainly I'll look forward to this forum and various other forums to come and discuss it. But in a nutshell, and I don't want to give away the specific details because I think people might want to come and interfere with this book project like they have with my previous book project. They've tried to interfere. So I wanted to come out and then we can talk about all these things. But in a nutshell, you know, there are three dimensions to what the Breaking India forces are up to. There is the dimension of theory, which is theorizing the problems in a way that fits their ideology and completely ruins and runs counter to our worldview as Indians, completely counter to our grand narrative. The second is institutionalization of this machinery on a very global scale. And the third, which requires a lot of funding, and I'm tracking where this funding is coming from, and there are some big surprises. You will not expect that the funding is coming from some of these sources. And the third dimension is human resource. They are training a massive army of people, not only for the village level to go and create gadar and problems in villages, but also elite level. People who are exceedingly well educated, come from good families, who have got good backgrounds, who are part of elite establishments. Many of those have been compromised. So this is if you look at the three dimensions, there is the knowledge dimension, the knowledge theory, the discourse, narrative dimension. And then there is the dimension of institutions being funded and being, infiltrated, and large machinery of these. You will be surprised at some of the strength and clout that these institutions have achieved in a very nice, subtle way, masking their intentions such that they're not really noticed in a certain way. But my job is to expose it. And then the human resource that they're creating, a very large human resource of people. So what you have seen recently are let's say, market testing. They're doing field trials of these weapons to see how we react and to perfect their weapons. These are these intellectual weapons that I'm talking about. So the purpose of this book is like the previous Breaking India book a decade ago, to be ahead of the curve, to create a large amount of awareness of our people. It will take me many months of traveling and giving talks to get enough of our people to understand what it is I'm talking about, given the gravity of the situation. People will tend to see it as sort of more of the same, but the idea is that it is not more of the same, it's something quite different. So with that, I will close. I really want to thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to be part of this and a few other organizations in India. And I feel that my work is very much connected with the kind of things that concern you. I'm just looking at it from a different vantage point. I have access to many kinds of international sources. I have teams of people that go there and work in those organizations and work with them and try to get information. So I have my own approach to the knowledge gathering that I do, and I put it all out very publicly and let the chips fall where they may. So with that, I will close and would love to take any questions if anybody has. And thank you very much for inviting me.